Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. I welcome you in to this worship service by inviting you to repeat our First Church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words this morning are the poem Making Peace by Denise Levertov. A voice from the dark called out, "The poets must give us imagination of peace to oust the intense, familiar imagination of disaster. Peace, not only the absence of war, but peace, like a poem, is not there ahead of itself, cannot be known except in the words of its making, grammar of justice, syntax of mutual aid. Peace is made by and among all of us. A feeling towards it, a dimly sensing rhythm is all we have until we begin to utter its metaphors, learning them as we speak. A line of peace might appear if we restructured the sentence of our lives, revoked its reaffirmation of profit and power, questioned our needs, allowed long pauses. A cadence of peace might balance its weight on that different fulcrum. Peace, a presence, an energy field more intense than war, might pulse then, stanza by stanza into the world, each act of living one of its words, each word of vibration of light, facets of the forming crystal. Let's go now to our beloved sanctuary to light the chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
My name is Reverend Kimberly, and it is my honor to serve as the Minister of Religious Education. The story I have for you today is called Extra Yarn. It was written by Mac Barnett and illustrated by John Clausen. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either white of snow or black of soot from chimneys, Annabelle found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and she knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet," shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone. Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you. Then I'll knit one for everyone, said Annabel, so they won't have to turn around. Impossible, said Mr. Norman. You can't. But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabel still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and for Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters or even long pants, who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. No sweaters for me, thanks, said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then, Annabel had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats, and for other animals too. Soon Annabel will run out of yarn. But it turned out she didn't. So Annabel made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of the remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn. And people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabel's hand. One day, an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabel. Little girl, said the archduke, I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1,000,000. No, thank you, said Annabel, who was knitting a sweater for a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. 2,000,000, he said. Annabel shook her head. No, thanks. 10,000,000, shouted the archduke. Take it or leave it. Leave it, said Annabel. I won't sell the yarn. And she didn't. So that night, the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabel's house, and they stole the box. And they took it to the archduke, and who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea back to his castle. The archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair, and he took out the box, and he lifted the lid, and he looked inside. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The archduke hurled the box out of the window and shouted, Little girl, I curse you with my family curse. You will never be happy again. But it turned out she was. The end.
As we enter this time of meditation, followed by silence, followed by spirit of life, I invite you to just take a second to get comfortable in your body, whatever that means to you. Maybe it means feeling your feet on the floor, grounding you, or maybe it means feeling the top of your head, connecting you to all that is. Or maybe it means feeling your breath move in and out and allowing it to bring you into being here right now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Create space in our hearts and our lives for imagination and creativity. Give us the time and the energy to open up to this powerful resource and explore our visions and our hopes for the future. Nourish our spirits in this time of winter, of long nights and snowy skies. Nourish our spirits in these early days of the hope of a new administration, of the hope of vaccination. Nourish our spirits with comfort and care and resilience and dawning possibility. And when we are ready, let us dip down deep into the well of inspiration and draw up imagination, beauty, and love. And let us create. Let us use those tools to express our souls and bless the world. May it be so, and amen.
Good morning. My name is Dale Skaggs, and I am happy to serve as worship associate this morning. My house here in Milwaukee was built in 1889, the same year that the Eiffel Tower was completed in Paris. That tower is, of course, a triumph of imagination, but it's also a remarkable example of what can be created through the cumulative effects of a million small actions. It is held together by 2.5 million rivets, each one heated, shaped, placed, then sledgehammered tight. In a similar vein, the walls in my house are plaster over thousands of pieces of wood lath, each of those attached with as many as 10 hand-driven nails. The house was a little tired when we bought it, but we thought it had great bones, and I've always loved it, mostly, except when I didn't. Now, the good news was that it hadn't been ruined by renovations. The bad news was that it hadn't been well cared for. Among many examples, doors and windows were coated with so much paint they couldn't be opened, or in some cases wouldn't close. But no worries. I had the imagination to envision the sturdy old house restored to its original elegance with modern amenities while preserving its good bones and character. All it required was imagination and creativity. Unfortunately, I let my imagined perfect result become the enemy of the good. There were inevitable delays because in a house that old, every task is a custom job with trade-offs and compromises which replaced my happy vision with a reality of frustration and disappointment. I've gotten over it, but for a time, I didn't enjoy the house much, which makes what happened next perhaps a little surprising. A few years after moving to Milwaukee, we bought the remains of an old farm up in Door County. There were beautiful rolling fields and some woods, and yes, an old farmhouse in a sad state of disrepair. We considered tearing it down, but when we discovered that under the siding, the walls were made of logs, we couldn't bring ourselves to destroy that history. I showed a friend around the place and told him we had decided to keep the house and that I imagined we could make it a livable home. He laughed and said, "You've got a way better imagination than I have." Well, in truth, I had no idea exactly what would emerge. I just imagined a comfortable old house where we could enjoy spending time. So I began. I did much of the work myself. It took years to complete, but now we have that comfortable farmhouse. It required many inventive solutions to unforeseen problems, and it took a willingness to embrace the possible in lieu of an imagined perfect. But I had fun doing it, and in the end, it was quite rewarding. I wondered about why I experienced those two quite similar endeavors so differently, and I have a theory. The French philosopher Rousseau wrote that the world of reality has its limits. The world of imagination is boundless. But here's an intriguing thing. Say those two phrases in reverse order. The world of imagination is boundless. The world of reality has its limits. There is perhaps a subtle, but I think powerful difference in the two phrasings, borne out by my experience. In Milwaukee, my imagination saw a perfect reproduction, but that vision was whittled away by 1,000 small encounters with reality. In the farmhouse, I started with the undeniably imperfect reality and just trusted my constructive imagination to reveal creative solutions that would lead to good results. A few years ago, I stopped making New Year's resolutions. Or more precisely, I decided to make only one resolution and just renew it every year. So every January, I resolve that in the new year, I shall be resolute. That encourages my sustained focus without demanding a particular explicit goal. When I wonder how to keep our boundless imaginations from being smothered by frustrating realities, I think one answer is don't get too specific with expectation in our imaginings. Just resolve to be resolute in using imagination to guide our attention and to power our intentions, and no matter the circumstances, show us the way to love our neighbors, to walk lightly in this earth, and to stand strong for justice and peace.
Hmm. Thank you, Hazes, for sharing that beautiful piece with us from your own work of art house restored with imagination. In 1929, Virginia Woolf published the essay A Room of One's Own, based on lectures she delivered at two of the women's colleges at the University of Cambridge. In it, Woolf takes the reader on a journey with the character of a woman who, like Woolf, has been asked to give a lecture to a women's college on the subject of women and fiction. The narrator, Mary, begins at Oxbridge, a men's college, which she finds intellectually stimulating, but from which she is largely shut out because she's a woman. When she returns to her women's college, she finds it much less satisfying in intellect and material resources. She and her friend reflect on the relative riches of men's colleges compared to women's colleges and wonder why women have less money than men. Mary herself has been left some money by a wealthy aunt, and this has freed her to be able to think of things in themselves, as Woolf put it, freed her to be able to reflect on the world without owing anyone anything or being indebted to anyone. Mary finds this situation to be superior to most women's circumstances. It gives her an unusual freedom of the mind. After being shut out at the men's college, Mary turns to the library to research why women so rarely have money of their own. And there she finds that all the authors who have written on the subject of women are men. She finds so little information on the lives of women that she turns to her imagination to explore the realities of women's lives. She creates a character she calls Judith Shakespeare, William Shakespeare's equally talented sister, and then imagines what a brilliant female writer would have experienced and created in William Shakespeare's time and place. So while these Shakespearean siblings are equally talented, the brother goes to school and then gets work at a London theater, while the sister, Judith, is prevented from going to school. As a teenager, she runs away to London to escape an unwanted marriage. However, unlike her brother, she's turned away from the theater and can neither earn money nor exercise her talents. In the imaginings of Mary, Judith was shut out from schooling and professional opportunities that would have allowed her to develop and practice her inherent genius. Tragically, Judith ends her own life in despair. In this story, Virginia Woolf uses imagination to weave a story that gives the reader emotional access to understanding how resources are as important for creativity as natural talent is. Woolf's main argument in her essay is that a woman needs money and a room of one's own to write fiction. It does take energy to write. It takes energy to use the imagination to create any kind of art. While Virginia Woolf's specific requirements of money and a room of one's own arise from her time and place and culture, it is certainly true that it takes energy and time and space to imagine and create. This pandemic is exhausting. In Reverend Dina's sermon last week, she said that she was just beginning to crack the shell on the art of her heart, just beginning to feel hopeful enough to sprout new tendrils of creativity and possibility. I really resonated with that. Although for me, the experience of that cracking has been more periodic. I have moments where the light shines through the cracks in the walls guarding my heart, moments when the silver fish of my imagination is tickled with sun rays that glint off its shining fins. It makes my dark, adjusted eyes gasp and water, makes me hopeful but shaky. It allows me to realize just how much has been lost or numbed or stored away in drawers to be dealt with later. The relief I'm experiencing in these first days after our country's nuclear codes were taken away from the demagogue, the relief has created more space to explore and to feel. These early days of relief are still tender, still aching, still stretching and learning what has been lost and what hurts and where all the feelings are even stored. It's still pretty hard right now. The pandemic has not ended, and although we have more hope for an end with every vaccination, and I am cheering on the members of our church who have gotten their first vaccination shots, we're still saddled with ambiguity about the timeline. Those circumstances may not be rife for your soul to have the time and the space and the energy it takes to imagine. It's wise to go at the soul's pace, to not create rigid expectations of a perfect house remodel or push the spirit into producing when it's really time for resting and repairing. In a short story called Finding Stillness in the Middle of Chaos by writer and visual artist John P. Weiss, a lifelong painter in the story advises another painter who is just beginning to paint that artwork and creative expression are gifts we give ourselves, gifts we give the ones we love and others. We might dream of artistic fame and recognition, but this is not the purpose of art. The purpose of art is to touch others, to inspire, move, instigate thought, and remind all that the true measure of a life is love, authenticity, and meaningful contribution. The painter goes on to give the wise counsel: do not burden yourself with regrets, unfulfilled dreams, and sadness. If you have loved truly, if you have improved the lives of others, if you have raised well-adjusted children, then you have lived a worthwhile life. Your artistic expression, whether widely recognized or obscure, reflects your deepest humanity and spirit. And that is enough. That is enough. Art, imagination, creativity is the expression, the deepest expression of human spirit. Imagination is how our souls roam through possibility. Art and imagination usually don't like to be forced or controlled. Like a deer entering a clearing, we don't want to scare our dreamings away. Imagination needs nurture, not control. Rather than requiring a specific outcome, imagination needs nourishment for its own flow. It needs to be fed. It needs time and space and energy and a gentle allowing. Artists find these things in different ways. In an interview with CNN's Anderson Cooper, the first youth poet laureate of the United States, Amanda Gorman, shared her story of writing and delivering the January 20th inauguration poem, The Hill We Climb. Gorman and Cooper discussed their mutual struggles with speech impediments, something they share with President Biden and, as Gorman noted, Maya Angelou. Gorman said she's used writing as a way to get her voice out, but that over time, writing has also metamorphosized into speech pathology, so that the more she practiced the spoken word tradition, the more she was able to teach herself how to pronounce the letters she struggled with. Before Inauguration Day, Gorman read The Hill We Climb out loud over and over. Then, before taking the stage on January 20th, she recited the motto she always does before she performs. In the interview with Cooper, Gorman shared that motto that she uses for strength and inspiration. She said, "I am the daughter of Black writers. We are descended from freedom fighters who broke their chains and changed the world. They call me." There are many different places to find the energy to create. Where do you turn? When things are hard, how do you nourish your spirit and feed your imagination? Do you have a space for it? The space doesn't have to be a place you own. It could be a place of beauty or peace, somewhere your curiosity feels awakened or your spirit feels nourished. Do you have a practice for encouraging yourself? Perhaps even for connecting to lineage like Amanda Gorman does. Do you have a practice that helps you dip into the deepest well of spirit and pull up living water to bless yourself and the world? The narrator in Virginia Woolf's story finds the lineage of women writers lacking, which she links to their lack of access to education and wealth. She says women must have money and a room of their own to write. With that, Woolf makes an important point about the way structural access to resources impoverishes entire groups of people, making it more difficult to imagine and create. However, when she says women must have money and a room of their own to write, she's also universalizing her own experience when she's actually observing and articulating the experience of white, middle, and upper class women of her time and her place. Women and people of all genders from different backgrounds in different times and places have found their own ways to access the energy, the time, and the space needed to create. Woolf was right that it takes time, space, and energy to imagine and create, and right that structural impediments to resources make it harder to create. That's particularly true for people of color, like Amanda Gorman's ancestors, who had to break their chains to change the world. Woolf was wrong, however, that money and property are the only roads to accessing the power of the imagination, as Gorman shows that in the words from her poem, a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother could not only dream of becoming president, but could find herself reciting for one. People of all races and genders need time and space and energy to exercise their imagination. If you're not feeling it right now, you might need a little recharge. Time to dip back into the well, rest, or repair. Don't worry. The light is there inside you, waiting, and the gifts of inspiration and imagination will come when you have the energy for them. Don't push yourself to produce during a fallow time. For as John P. Weiss wrote, art is the deepest expression of our souls. It's there for the sake of genuine expression of what is true for you right now. It's not on a perfect production timetable. It's a gift of the Spirit given freely for love. Woolf closes A Room of One's Own by calling on the women to whom she is speaking to give more access and more resources to their daughters so that each next generation can come closer to what she calls the incandescent poetry of Shakespeare. We must pass the gifts of the Spirit on, making sure the next generation has access to the resources they need to imagine. As we gather sun rays and gather colors and gather words, not just for the gray winter of our own lives, but to pass on to those who come after us, giving them the gifts of beauty and freedom and inspiration, giving them to the next generation of artists and musicians and painters. When you are ready, dip down into that well of your own light and then pour out your piece of the endowment to our daughters, our sons, and our children. Pour out the beauty and the access to the resources of learning, of energy, of space and time to the next generation of artists of all races and all genders. Let us be part of making sure more people of color and women of all races, more LGBTQ folks and people with disabilities, more poor folks and immigrants, and all people who have less structural access to resources have the time and the energy to imagine, to create art, and to share the deepest expression of the soul with the world. Let us choose to bless the world with the warmth of stories of the sun. Bless the world with the colors of the poppies and berry bushes. Bless the world with the poetry of gratitude for the seasons of our lives. And let us share our blessings with others so that they might do the same, might, like Amanda Gorman, see our past and also sing the future. Here are the closing lines of Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we left. Every breath from my bronze-pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the golden hills of the west. We will rise from the wind-swept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover. And every known nook of our nation and every corner called our country, our people diverse and beautiful, will emerge battered and beautiful. When the day comes, we step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn balloons as we free it, for there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it. If only we're brave enough to be it. May it be so, and amen.
Hey, you guys, Leah here. So I must be among millions, if not billions of people who tuned in to the inauguration yesterday on January 20th, 2021. And I was inspired by every moment of it, but especially rapt and lifted, exalted, just completely fixated and moved by Amanda Gorman's poem, her presence, her beauty, her artistry. And so this song was born. There is always a light when we are ready to see it. There is always a light when we are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night, to climb this hill, together we will. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to see it. There is always a light in the dark. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to see it. There is always a light. There is always a light. We are ready to be it. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a gift. Together we will. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. There is always light. To see the light, to be the light, to raise our eyes in the dark of night and be a climb this hill. Together we will. There is always shine your light. There is always shine. There is always shine your light. There is always shine. Be the light.
Thank you all so much for your generosity. Pledges are at the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity. We're also grateful for additional gifts given to support our ministry, and we thank the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and are supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to you," or who are giving on our website. You can see those options on the screen before you now. Your gifts help us continue to provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. Peace Action of Wisconsin is our January Share the Plate recipient. Peace Action Wisconsin is a peace and justice organization which works to abolish the threats of war and nuclear weapons. They are committed to nonviolence as a way of life for a world where human needs are met and the environment preserves. To make a donation to Peace Action of Wisconsin, please visit their website at peaceaction.org. You can see all of these options on your screen right now, and they will live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. So thank you so much for giving, either right now or for coming back later and giving then. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you. Our closing words today are by Jan Richardson. I cannot tell you how the light comes. What I know is that it is more ancient than imagining, that it travels across an astounding expanse to reach us, that it loves searching out what is hidden, what is lost, what is forgotten or in peril or in pain, that it has a fondness for the body, for finding its way toward flesh, for tracing the edges of form, for shining forth through the eye, the hand, the heart. I cannot tell you how the light comes, but that it does, that it will, that it works its way into the deepest dark that enfolds you. Though it may seem long ages in coming or arrive in a shape you did not foresee. And so we must this day turn ourselves towards it. May we lift our faces to let it find us. May we bend our bodies to follow the arc it makes. May we open and open more and open still to the blessed light that comes. May it be so, dear ones, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.